The grand chamber of the Galactic Concordat stretched upward for 300 meters, its walls made of living crystal that pulsed with soft blue light. 5 massive platforms floated in a circle around the center, each one holding the representatives of the galaxy's most powerful species. They had ruled known space for 50,000 years, and they ruled it still. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood in the center of the chamber, a small human figure dwarfed by the architecture and the beings around her. She wore the formal uniform of the United Earth Alliance, dark blue with silver trim, and she carried a data tablet that contained humanity's petition. Her hands were steady, but her heart pounded in her chest. This was the moment humanity had worked toward for 200 years. "Honorable Council," she began, her voice amplified by the chamber's acoustics. "I come before you today to request that humanity be granted full membership status in the Galactic Concordat. We have met all the requirements outlined in the probationary agreement. Our technology has advanced. Our worlds are peaceful and productive. We have contributed to concordat trade and science. We ask now to be recognized as equals among the great civilizations of the galaxy." On the first platform, the Vexari stirred. They were tall and thin, with gray skin that seemed to shimmer in the light. Their eyes were large and completely black without pupils or whites. Overseer Thelquin leaned forward, and when she spoke, her voice seemed to come from inside Elena's head rather than from her mouth. "Equals?" The word dripped with amusement. "You have existed in space for barely 2 centuries. We have records older than your entire civilization. You call this equality?" From the second platform, a Lumenshar representative spoke. The Lumenshar were beings of living crystal, their bodies geometric and perfect, refracting light into rainbow patterns. Their voice was like wind chimes, musical but cold. "The human species has shown promise, this is true. But they are young, impulsive. They lack the wisdom that comes with age." "They lack much more than wisdom," growled the Krathzul general from the third platform. The Krathzul were insectoid, their bodies covered in glossy black chitin with 6 arms and mandibles that clicked when they spoke. General Zekther's compound eyes fixed on Elena with obvious contempt. "They wage war on themselves. Even now their own species fights over territory and resources. They are barbarians with starships." Elena felt her face flush, but she kept her voice level. "Every species has conflicts in its history. Humanity has learned from its mistakes. Our worlds are united now. We have achieved peace among ourselves." "Peace born of exhaustion, not enlightenment," said the Nothan delegate from the fourth platform. The Nothan were amphibious, their blue-green skin glistening with moisture, their large eyes set wide on their broad heads. "Your species reproduces too quickly, consumes too much, and dies too soon to develop true perspective. You live for perhaps 100 of your years. We live for 800. How can you understand the long view?" The fifth platform held the Archon representative, a being of pure silicon-based life that looked like a metallic sculpture come to life. Its voice was precise and emotionless, like a computer running calculations. "Statistical analysis of human behavior patterns indicates a 73.4% probability of cultural instability within the next 5 centuries. Granting full membership status to an unstable species would compromise concordat security." Elena took a deep breath. She had expected resistance, but not this level of unified dismissal. "With respect, Honorable Council, every species you represent was once young. Every civilization had to prove itself. We are asking for the same opportunity you were given." Thelquin laughed, a sound like breaking glass inside Elena's mind. "The same opportunity? Child, when we joined the Concordat, we brought technology that revolutionized galactic travel. We brought art that inspired worlds. We brought wisdom accumulated over millennia. What do humans bring? Crude fusion drives? Simple AI that barely qualifies as intelligence? Entertainment media that celebrates violence? We bring diversity of thought," Elena said, her voice rising despite her best efforts to stay calm. "We bring new perspectives. She stopped suddenly. Something was wrong. Her thoughts felt exposed, like someone was reading a book over her shoulder. She looked up at Thelquin and saw the Vexari's eyes glowing with a faint purple light. "We bring violence," Thelquin said, and suddenly images flooded the chamber. They were projected directly from Elena's mind. Memories that the Vexari was pulling out and displaying for all to see. The Napoleonic Wars, the World Wars, nuclear explosions over cities, terrorist attacks, genocides, police violence, every dark moment of human history laid bare. "Stop," Elena whispered. feeling violated in a way she had never experienced before. "You have no right, but we have every right," Thelquin said coldly. "The Concordat must know what we are dealing with. And what we are dealing with, honored colleagues, is a species that has killed more of its own kind than any war in Concordat history. They are a plague that spreads across worlds, consuming and destroying. And they dare to ask for equality with us?" The other council members murmured their agreement. General Zekther clicked his mandibles in what might have been laughter. The Lumenshar chimed softly, a sound of disappointment. The Nothan delegate blinked slowly, a gesture of pity. The Archon simply calculated, its processors humming. Elena felt tears of rage and shame burning in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Every species has darkness in its past," she said, her voice shaking. The Krath-Zul conquered 14 species before joining the Concordat. The Lumenshar created AI servants and then abandoned them when they became sentient. "The Vexari, enough!" Thelquin's mental voice was like a thunderclap. "You dare judge us? You, whose entire species is barely a footnote in galactic history. The petition is denied. Humanity will remain on probationary status for another 5 centuries minimum. Perhaps by then you will have evolved beyond your primitive nature." 5 centuries? Elena's voice cracked. "That's 20 human generations." "Exactly," said the Lumenshar. "Perhaps in that time you will learn patience." The council platforms began to rise, the session ending. Elena stood alone in the center of the chamber, her petition rejected, her species humiliated. But worse than the rejection was the laughter. The Nothan were giggling among themselves. The Krathzul were chittering with amusement. Even the Archon seemed to emit a sound that might have been mechanical satisfaction. Thelquin's voice echoed in Elena's mind one last time. "Go home, little human. Play with your toy ships in your little corner of space, and be grateful we allow you even that much." Elena left the chamber with as much dignity as she could manage. Behind her, she heard General Zekther say to the other council members, "I give them another century before they beg us to manage their worlds for them. They lack the strength to survive on their own." 3 months later, the Krathzul military fleet appeared in orbit around New Lisbon, a human colony world on the edge of Concordat space. The colony was home to 4 million people, most of them farmers and miners who had left Earth to build a new life among the stars. General Zekther himself led the attack. His flagship, the Conqueror's Mandible, was 3 kilometers long and bristled with plasma cannons. It was accompanied by 200 smaller warships, each one more powerful than anything in the human defense fleet. The colonists sent out desperate distress calls. They had no military presence, just a handful of system patrol ships meant to chase away pirates. The Krathzul ignored all attempts at communication and opened fire. The bombardment lasted 6 hours. Cities burned. The orbital stations were destroyed. Ships trying to evacuate were shot down. When it was over, New Lisbon was a graveyard. 3.5 million people were dead. The survivors huddled in underground shelters waiting for rescue that came too late. 5 more colonies were hit over the next 2 weeks. Not all were destroyed as completely as New Lisbon, but the message was clear. Humanity was prey and the Krathzul were hunters. Admiral Marcus Chen watched the reports from his flagship, the UEA's Defiant, humanity's largest warship. It was 800 meters long and carried the most advanced weapons humans had developed. It was nothing compared to the Krathzul fleet. Marcus was 60 years old, with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. He had a daughter on New Lisbon. Her name was Jennifer, and she was a doctor. She had 2 children of her own, Marcus's grandchildren. They were 3 and 5 years old. All of them were dead now. Marcus read the casualty reports with trembling hands. Then he read the response from the Concordat Council. It was brief and dismissive. The attack on New Lisbon and the other colonies was classified as a minor border dispute. The Council suggested that humanity exercise better judgment in colony placement and avoid antagonizing established powers. There would be no justice, no protection, no consequences for the Krathzul. Marcus Chen was not a man given to emotional displays, but he wept that night in his private quarters. He wept for his daughter and his grandchildren. He wept for the millions of humans who had died because they were considered unimportant by the galaxy's rulers. And then he stopped weeping and started planning. He called a meeting of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the leaders of humanity's military across all colony worlds. They met via secure quantum communication, their holographic images filling a conference room on Earth. "They've shown us what they think of us," Marcus said, his voice cold and hard. "They see us as insects to be crushed when convenient. The Concordat will not protect us. They will not grant us equality. They will not even acknowledge our right to exist." "What are you suggesting?" asked Admiral Keiko Tanaka, commander of the Pacific Fleet. Marcus looked at each of them in turn. "I'm suggesting we stop asking for permission to survive. I'm suggesting we leave the Concordat and its territory entirely. And I'm suggesting we make sure that no one, ever again, can do to us what the Krathzul just did." "That's a declaration of independence," said General Ibrahim Hassan. "They'll see it as rebellion." "Let them," Marcus said. "We've tried their way for 200 years. It got us nothing but contempt and corpses. I say we try something different." The vote was unanimous. 1 week later, Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood before the Concordat Council one final time. She delivered a brief message that had been approved by every government on every human world. "The United Humanity Alliance hereby withdraws from the Galactic Concordat. We renounce our probationary status and all obligations under Concordat law. We claim sovereign territory in the systems we currently occupy, and we demand that all non-human ships leave our space immediately. Any violation of our borders will be considered an act of war. We will have no further communication with the Concordat." She turned and walked out before they could respond. Behind her, the council erupted in disbelief and amusement. Thelquinn's laughter echoed through the chamber. "The children throw a tantrum. How predictable. Let them sulk in their corner. They will come crawling back when they realize they cannot survive without us." General Zekther clicked his mandibles in agreement. "I give them 10 years before they collapse from internal conflicts. And when they do, we will be there to pick up the pieces." But humanity did not collapse. Humanity closed its borders, shut down all communication, and disappeared behind a wall of silence. Ships that approached human space simply vanished. Probes sent into the territory returned nothing but static. The Concordat's best intelligence agencies could not penetrate what they started calling the quiet zone. For 50 years, the galaxy heard nothing from humanity. And in that silence, the greatest transformation in human history began. The Concordat Council had long since stopped discussing humanity. 50 years had passed since the humans had withdrawn into their self-imposed isolation, and in that time the galaxy had moved on. Trade routes adjusted to avoid human space. The territories humanity once occupied became blank spots on star maps, marked with warnings about the mysterious disappearances of ships that ventured too close. Thelquinn, now an elder overseer of the Vexari, occasionally wondered what had become of the angry little species. She probed the edges of the quiet zone with her telepathic abilities but found nothing. It was as if humanity had simply ceased to exist. Sometimes she felt a twinge of something that might have been regret, but she dismissed it. The humans had been children playing with technology they did not understand. Their silence was probably the result of some catastrophic war among themselves or perhaps a plague. Either way, they were no longer the Concordat's concern. But behind the wall of silence, humanity was very much alive. And humanity was building. Dr. Sarah Okonkwo stood on an observation platform that floated in the vacuum of space, held aloft by gravity generators that humanity had perfected 20 years earlier. Before her stretched a sight that would have driven any Concordat observer mad with disbelief. She was looking at a planet-sized warship. It was not quite finished yet. The massive sphere was still under construction, with thousands of automated drones and construction vessels swarming over its surface like silver insects. But already it was 12,000 kilometers in diameter, larger than Earth itself. Its hull was made of quantum-compressed matter, a material so dense that a cubic centimeter weighed as much as a small moon. The surface bristled with weapons batteries, shield generators, and sensor arrays. This was the Prometheus, humanity's first Titan-class warship. And it was not alone. Sarah was 73 years old now. She had been 30 when the Krathzul destroyed New Lisbon. She had lost her brother and his family in that attack. Like millions of other humans, she had channeled her grief into purpose. She had become the chief architect of the Titan project, the single largest engineering endeavor in human history. "Status report," she said into her communication device. The voice of Commander Rebecca Torres came back immediately. Rebecca was stationed on the construction control ship Architect's Dream, coordinating the work of 2 million construction workers and 10 billion automated systems. Prometheus is at 92% completion. Weapon systems are being calibrated. Life support is fully operational. We're on schedule for the first test of the main conversion drive in 3 weeks. And the others? Sarah asked. Defiance is at 87%. Retribution is at 81%. Liberty is at 76%. Horizon is at 72%, all within acceptable parameters. 5 Titan-class warships, 5 planet-sized instruments of war. Sarah sometimes had trouble believing they had actually done it. The plan had been conceived in those dark days after humanity's withdrawal from the Concordat. Admiral Marcus Chen had gathered the brightest minds from every human world and given them a simple directive. Make sure this never happens again. Make sure humanity can defend itself against any threat, from any source at any scale. The scientists and engineers had worked for 5 years just to design the Titans. The technology required did not exist, so they invented it. They developed conversion drives that could turn matter directly into energy, providing essentially unlimited power. They created quantum compression fields that could pack the mass of a small planet into a hull strong enough to withstand anything short of a supernova. They designed weapons that could manipulate space-time itself, tearing holes in reality or crushing ships into singularities. And they had to do it all in secret, behind walls of silence that kept the Concordat from discovering what they were building. The cost had been staggering. Entire star systems were stripped of resources. Asteroid belts were mined to dust. Gas giants were harvested for their hydrogen. 200 human worlds had transformed themselves into industrial centers, every citizen contributing to the project in some way. Children grew up never seeing natural skies, only the metal ceilings of factory habitats. Artists became engineers. Poets became programmers. An entire generation sacrificed normalcy so that future generations might live in safety. Sarah walked along the observation platform, her magnetic boots keeping her anchored in the zero gravity. Through the transparent aluminum floor, she could see one of the construction zones where workers in powered exoskeletons were installing a weapon battery. Each individual cannon in that battery was 300 meters long. The battery itself contained 1,000 such cannons, and the Prometheus had 500 of these batteries distributed across its surface. A young engineer named David Park floated up beside her. He was 25 years old, born the year after humanity withdrew from the Concordat. He had never known anything but the Titan project. Dr. Okonkwo, "The neural interface teams are ready for your inspection," he said. Sarah nodded and followed him to a transport pod that would take them inside the Prometheus. The interior of the Titan was a world unto itself. Entire cities existed within the ship's structure, complete with parks, schools, and residential areas. 8 million people would crew the Prometheus when it was complete, and they would live their entire lives aboard the vessel if necessary. The neural interface chamber was located deep in the ship's core. Here, the Prometheus's quantum computer systems connected directly to the minds of specially trained operators who could control the ship's functions with thought alone. It was technology adapted from the Vexari telepathy, but improved beyond anything the Concordat had developed. 3 operators were already connected, their bodies suspended in transparent tubes filled with oxygenated gel. Neural cables ran from ports in their skulls to connection points on the chamber walls. Their eyes were closed, but Sarah knew they were fully conscious, experiencing the Prometheus as if it were an extension of their own bodies. "How do they feel?" Sarah asked the medical supervisor. "All vitals are normal. Stress levels are acceptable. They report a sense of completeness they never experienced with the smaller training systems." The supervisor smiled slightly. "They say it feels like becoming a god." Sarah understood what they meant. She had experienced the interface herself once with a much smaller ship. The sense of power was intoxicating. Every weapon at your mental command. Every sensor feeding you information. The ability to move something the size of a planet with a thought. It was dangerous in its way. They had lost 3 operators in the early days who could not handle the psychological weight of that much power, and went mad. But these 3 were stable. They had been selected from thousands of candidates and trained for years. They were ready. Admiral Marcus Chen arrived at the Prometheus construction site 2 weeks later. He was 89 years old now, his body kept healthy by medical treatments that could extend human life to nearly 200 years. But he looked every one of his years. His hair was white, his face lined with deep wrinkles. He had spent half a century preparing for war. Sarah met him at the main docking port. They embraced briefly, old friends who had worked together for decades. "It's magnificent," Marcus said, looking around at the interior of the ship. They were standing in a main corridor that was 50 meters wide and stretched for kilometers. Electromagnetic trains rushed past, carrying personnel and equipment. "It's monstrous," Sarah corrected. "We've built 5 planet-sized weapons of mass destruction. Sometimes I wonder if we've become the very thing we feared." Marcus looked at her steadily. "We've become what we needed to become. The galaxy showed us that mercy is weakness, that peace is impossible with those who see us as insects. We tried their way. Now we try ours." They walked to the command center located in what would be called the bridge on a smaller ship. But this was no bridge. It was a chamber the size of a cathedral, with holographic displays showing every aspect of the Prometheus's status. Hundreds of officers worked at stations, monitoring systems and running final tests. Captain James Rodriguez stood at the central command platform. He was 45 years old, a career military officer who had volunteered for the Titan program 20 years earlier. He would be the commanding officer of the Prometheus, the first human to captain a planet-sized warship. "Admiral on deck," he called out, and every officer snapped to attention. Marcus waved them back to work. "Status, Captain?" "Prometheus is ready for final testing, sir. All systems are operational. Crew complement is at full strength. We can begin shakedown cruises whenever you give the order." Marcus nodded slowly. He looked at the main display, which showed a tactical map of human space and the surrounding concorded territories. 50 years of silence. 50 years of building, and now, the question that would define humanity's future. What would they do with what they had built? "There's been activity on the border," Marcus said quietly. "Krathzul scouts probing our defenses. They've been doing it for years, but lately they've gotten bolder. General Zekthur is still in command of their military. Intelligence suggests he's planning something. An invasion?" Captain Rodriguez asked. "Perhaps. Or perhaps just another raid like New Lisbon. They think we're weak. They think our silence means we've collapsed or destroyed ourselves." Marcus smiled, but it was not a kind smile. They have no idea what's waiting for them. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She had built these ships to protect humanity, but she knew what they were capable of. Each Titan had enough firepower to sterilize a planet. The 5 of them together could annihilate the entire Krathzul fleet in a matter of hours. "Are we really going to use them?" she asked quietly. Marcus turned to her, and in his eyes she saw the ghost of the man who had lost his daughter and grandchildren 50 years ago. "If they give us no choice, yes, we will use them. We will use every weapon, every technology, every ounce of power we have built. Because the alternative is extinction." He turned back to the display. "Finish the tests, complete the preparations, and then we wait. If the Krathzul are wise, they will leave us alone. If they are foolish," he left the sentence unfinished. 3 months later, the Prometheus conducted its first deep space trial. The conversion drives powered up, and the massive ship moved for the first time under its own power. It accelerated to 0.7 light speed in 15 minutes, something no concordant ship could match. Its weapons fired at remote-controlled targets, and those targets simply ceased to exist. The test was a complete success. The Prometheus was operational, and so were its 4 sister ships. Humanity was ready. The question now was whether the galaxy was ready for humanity. In the concordant capital on the crystal world of Axis Prime, General Zekthur made his decision. 50 years of silence from humanity was long enough. It was time to remind the humans of their place in the galactic order. It was time to show them that the Krathzul were still the dominant military power in the galaxy. He assembled a fleet of 10,000 warships, the largest military force the Krathzul had ever gathered. It would be a demonstration of power, a lesson to the upstart humans who thought they could hide behind their borders. He gave the order to advance into human space, and with that order, he sealed the fate of his entire species. General Zekthur stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Conqueror's Mandible, and watched as his fleet assembled. 10,000 warships stretched out in formation, their hulls gleaming in the light of the nearby star. It was the most powerful military force the Krathzul had ever assembled. It was, he believed, more than enough to crush whatever pathetic defenses the humans had managed to construct in their 50 years of isolation. "All vessels report ready," his tactical officer chittered. "Jump calculations complete. We await your command, General." Zekthur clicked his mandibles in satisfaction. The humans had ignored 3 warning messages demanding they open their borders to concordant inspection. They had been given every opportunity to submit peacefully. Now they would learn the price of defiance. "Begin the invasion," he ordered. "All ships jump on my mark, 3, 2, T1 mark." Space rippled and tore as 10,000 ships activated their faster-than-light drives simultaneously. For a moment they existed in the strange in-between realm of hyperspace, and then they emerged into normal space deep within human territory. Zekthur's sensors immediately began scanning for the human defense fleet. He expected to find a few hundred ships at most, outdated vessels with primitive weapons. What he found instead made his blood run cold. "Sir." The sensor officer's voice was trembling. "I'm detecting a massive object directly ahead. Distance 200,000 kilometers. A space station?" Zekthur asked. "Destroy it, sir. The size..." "The sensors must be malfunctioning. Its reading is 12,000 kilometers in diameter." Zekthur felt his confidence waver. "That's impossible. No structure can be that large. Recalibrate the sensors." "Recalibration complete, sir. Reading confirmed." "There's something ahead of us and it's..." The officer's voice trailed off. "Visual," Zekthur snapped. The main display activated, and General Zekthur saw something that would haunt him for the rest of his very short life. It looked like a planet had appeared in front of his fleet. But it was not a planet. Its surface was artificial, covered in geometric patterns of metal and energy fields. Weapons batteries dotted its surface like continents. Energy readings showed power output that exceeded the combined energy production of the entire Krathzul homeworld. It was a ship. It was a planet-sized ship. "By the hive mind," someone whispered. Zekthur's mandibles locked in shock. 50 years. The humans had been silent for 50 years, and in that time they had built this monstrosity. How? How was it even possible? His communication officer broke the silence. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission. Audio only, put it through." A human voice filled the command deck. It spoke in concordant standard language, calm and emotionless. "Krathzul Fleet, this is Captain James Rodriguez of the United Humanity Alliance warship Prometheus. You have violated human sovereign space. You have 3 minutes to power down your weapons and prepare to be escorted back to the border. Failure to comply will result in your destruction." Zekthur found his voice. The initial shock was wearing off, replaced by anger. "You dare threaten the Krathzul Empire? I command 10,000 warships." "You are one vessel, no matter how large. Surrender now or we will reduce your ship to debris." There was a pause. Then the human voice spoke again, and this time there was something in it. Not fear, not anger, just a cold, hard finality. "You had 50 years, the human said. "You chose poorly." The communication cut off. For a moment nothing happened. Zekthur's fleet hung in space. 10,000 warships facing one impossible vessel. Then his weapons officer spoke. "Sir, the human ship is charging weapons. Energy readings are..." "Sir, I don't understand these readings." "The power levels are..." "Fire!" Zekthur screamed. "All ships open fire." 10,000 warships unleashed their weapons simultaneously. Plasma bolts, particle beams, kinetic projectiles, and fusion missiles streaked across space toward the Prometheus. It was enough firepower to destroy a fleet, to sterilize a planet, to crack open a moon. The weapons hit the Prometheus's shields and simply vanished. The energy was absorbed and dissipated as if it had never existed. Not a single shot reached the hull. "Impossible," Zekthur whispered. A single point on the Prometheus's surface lit up. It was barely visible against the massive bulk of the ship. Just a small circle of intense white light. From that point something emerged. It was not a beam or a projectile. It was a distortion in space-time itself. A tear in the fabric of reality. The gravitational lance struck the center of the Krathzul formation. Space twisted. Ships that were thousands of kilometers apart were suddenly pulled together as gravity went mad. Metal screamed as hulls compressed. Crew members died instantly as they were crushed by forces beyond comprehension. The gravitational distortion spread outward in a sphere, and everything it touched was dragged toward a single point at the center. In 4.3 seconds, 3,000 warships were compressed into a singularity smaller than a marble. Then the singularity collapsed, and there was nothing left but a brief flash of radiation. Silence filled the command deck of the Conqueror's mandible. Every officer stared at the tactical display in disbelief. 3,000 ships gone, just gone. One shot, one weapon, evasive maneuvers. Zekthur finally managed to scream. "All ships scatter formation." Target the weapon points, and the Prometheus opened fire with its secondary batteries. What Zekthur did not understand, what none of the Concordat species understood, was that the Titan-class warships were not designed to fight fleets. They were designed to fight planets. The secondary batteries that now activated were point defense systems meant to shoot down asteroids and orbital debris. Each battery contained 1,000 cannons. Each cannon fired a bolt of concentrated energy equivalent to a small nuclear explosion. 500 batteries opened fire. 500,000 energy bolts filled space. They struck with perfect accuracy, guided by targeting computers that could track a grain of sand at light-second distances. Krathazul warships exploded by the dozens, then by the hundreds. Shields overloaded instantly. Hulls vaporized. Entire ships simply ceased to exist. The Krathazul fleet tried to fight back. They were brave, these insectoid warriors. They had conquered worlds and crushed rebellions. They did not flee. They turned their ships toward the Prometheus and charged, firing every weapon they had. It made no difference. The Prometheus's point defense systems tracked every incoming shot and destroyed it before it reached the shields. Meanwhile, the secondary batteries continued to fire. The tertiary batteries activated, smaller weapons designed for close-range defense. Even these were more powerful than the main guns on Concordat capital ships. Captain Rodriguez stood on the command deck of the Prometheus, watching the battle through holographic displays. He felt no joy, no satisfaction, only a cold sense of duty. His neural interface allowed him to feel every shot the Prometheus fired, every enemy ship destroyed. It was like being a god of war, omniscient and omnipotent. Admiral Chen gave them a chance, he said quietly to his first officer. They chose this. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted 47 minutes. When it was over, 9,999 Krathazul warships were destroyed. Only one remained, the Conqueror's mandible. Captain Rodriguez ordered the firing to stop. He opened a communication channel to the Krathazul flagship. General Zekthur, I presume you're still alive. Good, I'm letting you live for a reason. You're going to take your ship back to the Concordat capital. You're going to show them the recordings of this battle, and you're going to tell them that humanity has 5 of these ships. Do you understand? Zekthur's voice was barely a whisper. I understand. One more thing, Rodriguez said. Tell them that we remember New Lisbon. Tell them that we remember every colony your people destroyed. Tell them that we've been quiet for 50 years, but we have not forgotten. We will never forget. He cut the communication and gave the order. The Prometheus's tractor beams engaged, grabbing the Conqueror's mandible and physically throwing it toward the border. The Krathazul flagship tumbled through space, its engines too damaged to correct course, but its life support and recording systems intact. In the command deck, Rodriguez sat down heavily. His hands were shaking. He had just killed hundreds of thousands of beings. It was necessary. It was justified. But it was not easy. Send a message to Admiral Chen, he said. Tell him the Prometheus has successfully defended human space. Tell him, he paused. Tell him that the galaxy is going to know what we've become. The recording of the battle reached the Concordat Council 3 days later. General Zekthur transmitted it from his damaged flagship, along with his full tactical analysis. The council gathered in emergency session, representatives from all 5 major species present. They watched in silence as the Prometheus destroyed the Krathazul fleet. They watched one single ship, annihilate 10,000 warships in less than an hour. They saw weapons that bent space-time, shields that were impenetrable, and power levels that exceeded anything in Concordat technology. When the recording ended, the chamber was silent. Thel Quinn was the first to speak. Her telepathic voice was weak, trembling with fear. This cannot be real. The humans do not have this technology. They were children. They were primitive. The Archon representative ran calculations on his internal processors. Analysis indicates the recording is genuine. Probability of forgery, 0.003%. The humans have developed technology that exceeds our own by several orders of magnitude. How many of these ships do they have? The Nothan delegate asked, his voice barely above a whisper. General Zekthur's holographic image appeared before them. His body was covered in injuries, his mandibles cracked. The human captain stated they have 5. Intelligence analysis suggests this is accurate. We detected construction activity in 5 different star systems before we lost our surveillance network. 5 planet-sized warships, the Lumenshar representative said. its crystalline voice resonating with something that might have been awe or terror. 5 ships that can each destroy a fleet. What have we created? Quinn's mental voice was sharp. We created nothing. They built this themselves. She stopped, realization dawning. We created the necessity. We humiliated them. We attacked them. We forced them to become this. The Archon's calculations continued. Probability analysis. If humanity deploys all 5 Titan-class warships against Concordat targets, expected outcome is total Concordat military defeat within 2 years. Individual species survival probabilities vary, but collective Concordat survival 17%. The chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives shouted over each other, demanding action, suggesting surrender, calling for preemptive strikes. But everyone there knew the truth. They had made a terrible mistake 50 years ago when they dismissed humanity as insignificant. And now humanity had become something more than they ever imagined. Something more powerful, something more dangerous. The children had grown up, and they had teeth. The Concordat was fracturing. In the 2 weeks since the Prometheus had destroyed the Krathzul invasion fleet, the carefully maintained unity of 50,000 years was crumbling like sand. The Nothan were the first to break ranks. Their delegation arrived at the edge of human space aboard a diplomatic vessel painted white, broadcasting peace on all frequencies. They requested permission to enter human territory and were granted safe passage. Within days, they had negotiated a separate peace treaty with humanity, offering full reparations for past grievances and recognition of human sovereignty. They also quietly shared intelligence about Concordat military deployments, hoping to prove their sincerity. The Lumenshar attempted to maintain neutrality, but their merchant fleets began avoiding any routes that might bring them into conflict with human interests. Their representatives spoke eloquently about the need for dialogue and understanding, though everyone noticed they were simultaneously moving their defensive fleets into position around their core worlds. The Vexari were in chaos. Their telepathic network allowed them to share thoughts and emotions across their entire species, and right now that network was flooded with fear. They could not sense the Titans. The psionic dampening fields that humanity had developed made the massive warships invisible to telepathy, which was deeply unsettling to a species that relied on mental powers for everything. Quinn, the elder overseer who had humiliated Ambassador Vasquez 50 years ago, made a desperate decision. She gathered the most powerful telepaths in Vexari space and launched a psionic assault on the human leadership. It was a technique they had used before to paralyze enemy commanders, forcing them to surrender without a shot being fired. The assault was targeted at Admiral Marcus Chen, who was known to be the architect of humanity's military buildup. The Vexari telepaths linked their minds and struck across the vast distances of space, focusing their combined willpower like a spear aimed at Chen's consciousness. The assault hit the neural shielding that every human military officer now carried as standard equipment. The psionic energy rebounded, amplified, and reflected back at its source. 17 Vexari telepaths died instantly, their brains burned out by their own reflected power. Quinn herself survived but was left catatonic, her mind shattered by the backlash. The Vexari realized with horror that humanity had developed defenses against their greatest weapon, and those defenses could be turned into weapons themselves. The Archons, ever logical, ran their simulations and concluded that resistance was mathematically futile. They began preparing proposals for peaceful coexistence, calculating the optimal terms that would ensure their survival. Only the Krathzul refused to accept the new reality. General Zekther had been removed from command, deemed too damaged psychologically to lead. His replacement, Commander Vrixtal, called for total war. He argued that the Titans, while powerful, could be destroyed through coordinated attacks. He claimed that Krathzul honor demanded they fight to the last warrior, rather than submit to humans. The other Concordat species listened to these declarations with growing unease. The Krathzul wanted to drag them all into a war that could not be won. Admiral Marcus Chen watched these developments from his office on Europa Station, humanity's military headquarters. He was 90 years old now, and he knew he would not live to see the end of this crisis. But he would see the next phase. "They're coming," he said to Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, who sat across from him. "All 5 Titans. They'll be here in 6 hours," Sarah nodded. She looked tired. They all did. Building the Titans had been exhausting. Using them was proving even more difficult. Are we really going to do this? Park them in orbit around the Concordat capital? Yes, Marcus said simply. We need to make it clear that we could destroy them all, but we're choosing not to. Fear alone won't keep the peace. They need to understand that we're offering them a choice, and if they choose wrong, Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then we do what we built these ships to do. We end the threat permanently. The 5 Titan-class warships emerged from FTL travel at the edge of the Axis Prime system, the capital world of the Galactic Concordat. Their arrival sent shockwaves through every sensor network in the system. 5 planet-sized warships, each one capable of destroying a fleet, now hung in space like harbingers of apocalypse. The Prometheus, the Defiance, the Retribution, the Liberty, and the Horizon. Together they represented the sum total of humanity's rage, fear, and determination. Together, they had enough firepower to sterilize every inhabited world in the Concordat. Captain Rodriguez commanded the Prometheus, while the other 4 Titans had their own captains, each one carefully selected and trained. But the overall mission commander was Admiral Marcus Chen, who had traveled to the Prometheus specifically for this moment. All ships, move into orbital position, Marcus ordered. Formation Delta 7. I want them to look up and see nothing but our hulls. The 5 Titans moved into orbit around Axis Prime, positioning themselves so that their massive bulk blocked out the system's sun. On the planet below, day turned to artificial night as the ships blotted out the light. It was a demonstration of power, but also a message. We control whether you live in light or darkness. The Concordat Council convened in their chamber, but this time they could see the Titans through the transparent crystal walls. The massive ships hung overhead like moons made of metal and menace. A communication request came from the Prometheus. The council accepted, and Admiral Marcus Chen's hologram appeared before them. He was an old man, bent with age, but his eyes were sharp and cold. Honorable Council, he began, and there was bitter irony in the formal address. 50 years ago, you rejected humanity's petition for membership. You called us children. You called us primitives. You laughed at us. He paused, and the silence was deafening. 3 months after that rejection, the Krathzul destroyed 6 human colonies. Millions of my people died. When we appealed to you for justice, you dismissed it as a minor border dispute. You told us to avoid antagonizing established powers. The council members could not meet his eyes. Even the Archon, who had no emotions, seemed to shrink back from the weight of that accusation. We learned something important that day, Marcus continued. We learned that the galaxy respects only strength. Mercy is seen as weakness. Peace is only possible when the cost of war is too high. You taught us this lesson very well. He gestured, and the hologram expanded to show all 5 Titans in orbit. We spent 50 years building these ships. We stripped entire star systems of resources. We turned our civilization into a war machine. Children grew up in factory habitats, never seeing natural skies. Artists became engineers. We sacrificed everything to ensure that what happened to New Lisbon would never happen again. The Nothan delegate spoke up, his voice trembling. Admiral Chen, we have already offered reparations. We seek peace. Please, I know, Marcus interrupted. And we accept your offer, Nothan. You showed wisdom, but there are others who have not. His gaze fixed on the empty Krathzul platform. Commander Vrixtal's hologram appeared there, his mandibles clicking with barely suppressed rage. Human, Vrixtal said. You may have powerful ships, but you cannot watch every world in the Concordat. You cannot be everywhere. We will find your weakness, and You will surrender the entire Krathzul military leadership for trial, Marcus said, his voice cutting through the threat like a blade. You will pay reparations to humanity for every colony you destroyed. You will reduce your military to defensive forces only, subject to human inspection, or the Krathzul homeworld will become a lifeless rock within the hour. You would not dare, Vrixtal screeched. You would commit genocide? Marcus Chen's face was carved from stone. You did. New Lisbon, New Shanghai, New Mombasa, New Damascus, New São Paulo, New Lagos, 6 colonies, millions of dead. You committed genocide 6 times over and you faced no consequences. Why should you expect different treatment? The chamber fell silent. The truth was laid bare. The Concordat had allowed atrocities to occur, and now they were facing a species that had learned from those atrocities. But, Marcus continued, and something in his voice softened slightly. We are not you. We will not kill billions of innocents because their leaders are fools. We offer you a choice, the same choice we once asked for. Submit to justice or face destruction, but the choice is yours. Vrixtal's hologram flickered as he struggled with rage and fear. Finally he spoke. What guarantee do we have that you will not destroy us anyway? None, Marcus said simply. You have only our word. Just as we once had only your word that the Concordat would protect us. We know how much that was worth. But unlike you, we mean what we say. He turned his attention to the full council. Humanity demands the following. Full reparations for all destroyed colonies. Permanent seats on the Concordat Council with full voting rights. The surrender of all Krathzul military leadership involved in the colony attacks for trial under Concordat law. Complete territorial sovereignty for all human space with violations treated as acts of war. And most importantly, a formal apology from this council for 50 years of contempt and negligence. The Lumenshar representative spoke, its chiming voice careful and diplomatic. And if we accept these terms? Then the Titans return to human space. We establish normal diplomatic relations. We trade, we share technology within reason. We become partners in maintaining galactic peace. Marcus paused. But make no mistake, we will never again be weak. We will never again be vulnerable. These ships will always exist, and if we are threatened, we will use them. Thelquin's successor, a younger Vexaria named Shenkar, spoke telepathically. Her mental voice was respectful, lacking the arrogance of her predecessor. Admiral Chen, I must know. When you connected with Elder Overseer Thelquin during the reflection of our psionic assault, what did you see in her mind? Marcus was quiet for a moment. I saw regret. I saw that she finally understood what she had done to us. I saw that she realized too late that we were not children to be dismissed, but beings worthy of respect. He looked at Shenkar. Tell her when she recovers that we remember both the cruelty and the final understanding. Both will shape how we treat your people. The Archon ran calculations and spoke. The optimal outcome is clear. We accept your terms, Admiral Chen. All of them. One by one, the other species agreed. The Lumenshar, the Nothan, even the Vexari, speaking through Shenkar, accepted. Only Vrixtal remained defiant. The Krathzul do not surrender. We will never, his hologram vanished. Moments later, a new Krathzul representative appeared, an older general named Thexun. Commander Vrixtal has been removed from authority. The Krathzul accept your terms, Admiral Chen. Our military leadership will surrender themselves for trial. We ask only that our species be allowed to survive. Marcus nodded slowly. That is all we ever asked for ourselves. And unlike you, we will grant it. He looked at each council member in turn. In 3 days, we will send representatives to formalize the treaty. Until then, the Titans remain in orbit. Not as a threat, but as a reminder. The galaxy has changed. Power has shifted. Learn from this as we learned from you. Respect is earned, not given. And those who forget this lesson will face the consequences. The hologram vanished, leaving the council alone in their chamber, overshadowed by 5 planet-sized warships that represented everything they had lost and everything they had never should have taught humanity to become. 10 years had passed since the 5 Titans appeared in orbit around Axis Prime. The galaxy had changed in ways both subtle and profound. Humanity now held 3 permanent seats on the Concordat Council, their representatives sitting as equals among species that had once dismissed them as primitive children. The Titans still existed, still patrolled human borders, and still reminded every species in the galaxy that humanity had the power to back up their words with overwhelming force. But something else had changed too. The ships were no longer just weapons. They had become symbols of something more complex. Ambassador Elena Vasquez, now 75 years old, walked through the gardens of New Lisbon Memorial Station. The station had been built in orbit around the planet where millions had died 50 years ago. Below, the world was slowly healing, its surface being terraformed once again, though the scars of the Krathzul bombardment would take centuries to fully erase. She was meeting with Shenkar, the Vexari representative who had replaced the broken Thelquin. Over the past decade, the two had become something that might be called friends, though both were too diplomatic to use that word officially. Your people are prospering, Shenkar said, her telepathic voice gentle in Elena's mind. The human neural shielding was sophisticated enough now that Vexari could communicate telepathically, without invading privacy. It was one of many technologies that had been shared in the years since the treaty. We are, Elena agreed, though I wonder sometimes at what cost. They stood before a memorial wall where the names of the dead from all 6 destroyed colonies were inscribed in light. Millions of names, each one representing a life ended by violence. The young ones do not understand, Elena continued. The children born after the Titans were completed. They see the ships as normal, as just another part of their world. They do not remember what we sacrificed to build them. Perhaps that is good, Shenkar suggested. Each generation should not have to carry all the burdens of the one before. Elena smiled sadly. Perhaps, but I worry we have taught them the wrong lesson. That overwhelming force is the answer to every problem. On Earth, in the Global Assembly building in Geneva, Senator Maria Santos was making the same argument to a chamber full of representatives from every human world. She was 35 years old, born the year after humanity withdrew from the Concordat. She had grown up in the shadow of the Titans and had never known anything else. We built these ships to survive, she said, her voice carrying across the chamber. And we did survive. We won recognition. We gained respect. But do we still need them? The Titans cost us immensely to maintain. Every year we pour resources into keeping them operational, resources that could be used for education, exploration, art, science. An older senator, James Cartwright, stood to respond. He had been a young engineer on the Prometheus construction project 50 years ago. Senator Santos, with respect, you do not understand what the galaxy is like. The moment we show weakness, the moment we suggest we might decommission the Titans is the moment someone will test us. The Concordat respects strength. Only strength. Then we are no better than them. Maria shot back. We have become exactly what we feared. We have let our trauma define us. Is this what those who died on New Lisbon would have wanted? For us to become a society built around weapons? The debate raged for hours, as it had been raging in various forms for years. Humanity was divided. The generation that built the Titans believed they were necessary. The generation born after believed they had served their purpose and should be retired. Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, now 93 years old and confined to a wheelchair, watched the debate on a holographic screen from her retirement home on Mars. She had given most of her life to the Titan project, and she understood both sides of the argument. We became what we had to be, she said softly to her nurse, a young woman named Akari. But we must choose what we remain. Akari looked at the old woman with curiosity. Do you regret building them? Sarah was quiet for a long time. I regret that we had to, but I do not regret that we did. Every child who grows up safely on a human world, every person who lives without fear of bombardment from space, they exist because we made hard choices. But yes, it cost us something. It cost us our innocence. It cost us a generation of artists and dreamers who became engineers and soldiers instead. She turned her chair to look out the window at the Martian landscape. The question is not whether the Titans were necessary. They were. The question is whether they are still necessary, and if not, whether we can let them go. The answer to that question came from an unexpected direction. Deep space monitoring stations began detecting anomalies beyond the edge of Concordat space. Ships were appearing, ships from beyond the galaxy. They were not hostile, but they were powerful and they were numerous. A new civilization had found the Milky Way, and they were curious about the species they found there. The Extragalactic Collective, as they called themselves, made contact with the Concordat Council. They were explorers and scientists seeking to understand other forms of life. Their technology was advanced, far beyond even the Titans in some ways. They came in peace, but they came with strength. For the first time in 10 years, the Concordat species found themselves united in concern. What if these newcomers were not as peaceful as they claimed? What if their curiosity turned to conquest? The council met in emergency session. This time, when humanity's representatives spoke, the others listened with respect born of memory. Admiral Marcus Chen had died 5 years earlier, passing peacefully in his sleep at the age of 94. His granddaughter, Commander Lisa Chen, now held his old position as Supreme Commander of Human Defense Forces. She was 42 years old, born in the last days before humanity withdrew from the Concordat. She remembered her great-aunt Jennifer, the doctor who died on New Lisbon. The loss was part of her family history, a wound that had never fully healed. The extragalactic collective has made no hostile moves, Lisa said to the council, but they have also made it clear they are capable of defending themselves. They have asked to meet with representatives from all major concordate species to discuss potential cooperation. The Nothan delegate spoke up. Should we not show strength? Deploy fleets to the meeting point? No, Lisa said firmly. We should show wisdom. We should remember what happens when we meet new species with contempt instead of respect. She looked directly at Shenkar as she said this, and the Vexari representative's mental voice carried agreement. Commander Chen speaks truth. We made this mistake with humanity. We should not repeat it. The Archon ran calculations. Probability analysis suggests that peaceful cooperation with the extragalactic collective yields optimal outcomes for all species. However, defensive preparations should be made in case first contact assessment proves incorrect. It was decided a delegation would meet the collective at a neutral point in space. And to show both goodwill and capability, the Concordate would send one representative from each major species, including humanity. Commander Lisa Chen stood on the bridge of the Prometheus, feeling the familiar connection of the neural interface. She was not Captain Rodriguez, who had retired 5 years ago to write his memoirs and teach at the academy. She was the new generation, raised in the shadow of these massive ships now commanding one. The Prometheus moved through space toward the meeting point, and with it came something unexpected. The Concordate had asked humanity to bring one Titan as part of the delegation, but they had also sent their own ships, not as escorts but as partners, a Lumenshar science vessel, a Nothan diplomatic ship, a Vexari telepathic relay station, even a Krathazul observer vessel, small and humble, a far cry from the massive fleets that had once invaded human space. On the observation deck, Lisa found an unusual gathering. Human crew members stood alongside Nothan engineers, Lumenshar scientists, and even a few Vexari telepaths who had volunteered to serve on the Prometheus. It was a sight that would have been impossible 10 years ago. Commander, said a Lumenshar scientist named Crystalline Dawn over mountains, its crystalline voice chiming softly. The extragalactic collective ships are within sensor range. They are impressive. Lisa looked at the tactical display. The collective had sent 7 ships, each one unique in design but clearly advanced. They were not as large as the Titans, but they radiated power and sophistication. All crews, this is Commander Chen. We are about to make first contact with a new civilization. I know many of you are nervous. I know some of you remember the old conflicts between our species. But look around you. Look at who stands beside you. We are here together, Concordate and humanity, united for the first time not by fear but by hope. She paused, choosing her words carefully. My great-grandfather built this ship because the galaxy taught him that only strength mattered. He was right in his time, but perhaps we can teach the galaxy something new now. Perhaps we can show that strength is not just about weapons. It is about choosing when to use them and when to extend a hand instead. The communication systems activated. A voice spoke in perfect Concordate standard language, though with an accent none of them had heard before. Greetings, people of the Milky Way. We are the Extragalactic Collective. We come seeking knowledge and friendship. We see that you have great power, represented by the magnificent ship that leads your delegation. We wonder if you will use that power for war or for peace. Lisa took a deep breath. This was the moment. The choice that would define humanity's future and perhaps the galaxy's. We built this ship for war, she said honestly. We built it because we had to, because we were threatened and dismissed and attacked. But we hope to use it for peace. We hope that our strength allows us to be generous, to be wise, to be better than we once were. There was a pause. Then the collective voice spoke again, and there was approval in it. Then we shall be friends. And perhaps together we can explore what lies beyond our galaxies. The meeting that followed would last for weeks. Treaties would be drafted. Technology would be shared. A new era would begin. One where the Milky Way species ventured outward together. On the Prometheus, Commander Lisa Chen looked out at the stars and thought about her great-grandfather, the old admiral who had built these ships out of rage and pain and determination. She thought about all the humans who had sacrificed normal lives to build floating fortresses in the void. We did it, she said softly. We survived. We proved ourselves. And now maybe, just maybe, we can be more than survivors. We can be explorers again, dreamers again, Behind her, Shenkar spoke telepathically, her mental voice warm. Your great-grandfather would be proud. He built weapons to protect his people. You are choosing what to do with those weapons now that the immediate threat has passed. That is wisdom, is it? Lisa asked. Senator Santos and her allies want to decommission the Titans. They say we do not need them anymore. And what do you think? Lisa watched the collective ships in the distance, graceful and powerful. I think we need them for now. Not as weapons, but as reminders. Reminders of what we can achieve when we commit ourselves fully. Reminders of what we paid to earn our place in the galaxy. And yes, reminders to anyone who might forget that humanity will not be pushed around again. She turned to face Shenkar. But I also think that one day, when the galaxy has truly changed, when strength is no longer the only language that matters, we might be able to let them go. We might be able to return to being explorers and artists and scientists instead of warriors maintaining an arsenal. That day will come, Shenkar said. Because of what you and your ancestors built. You bought humanity the time and space to choose its own future. What you do with that gift is up to you. Years later, historians would mark this moment as the beginning of the Great Expansion, when species from the Milky Way joined with the extragalactic collective to explore the universe together. The Titans remained active for another century, growing older but still powerful, still present at the edge of human space. Eventually, one by one, they were decommissioned. Not destroyed, but placed in orbit around human memorial worlds, monuments to what humanity had achieved and what it had sacrificed. The Prometheus, the first and greatest, was placed in orbit around New Lisbon, forever watching over the world it had been built to avenge. Children grew up playing in the shadows of these massive ships, using them as playgrounds and museums. They learned the history of how humanity had been dismissed, attacked, and nearly destroyed. They learned how their ancestors had responded by building the impossible. And they learned one final lesson, the lesson that took longest to understand, that the greatest strength is knowing when not to use the power you possess. That wisdom is not the absence of weapons, but the judgment to know when those weapons should remain silent. The galaxy had called them children. Humanity had proven they were wrong. But in doing so, humanity had also grown up, learning that being adult meant more than just having power. It meant knowing how to use it, when to use it, and most importantly, when to set it aside and reach for something better. The Titans had saved humanity from extinction, but humanity in the end had saved itself from becoming defined by those weapons. They remained survivors, but they chose to be more than that. They chose to be builders, explorers, artists, and dreamers once again. And in that choice, they finally became what they had always asked to be recognized as, equals among the stars, not because of the weapons they wielded, but because of the wisdom they had earned.
The massive warship Steadfast drifted silently through the darkness of space, its hull scarred and blackened. Pieces of metal and debris floated around it like a cloud of dead butterflies. To any watching eyes, the ship looked like just another casualty of the ongoing war between humans and the Coalition. Inside the bridge, Captain James Walker stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the main view screen with steady eyes. The bridge was dark, lit only by the dim glow of essential systems running on minimal power. The air was cold. They'd shut down all non-critical systems to maintain their cover. Status report, Walker whispered, though there was no real need for silence in space. Old habits died hard. All systems nominal, Captain, replied Tom from his engineering station. His fingers danced across the darkened console, making microscopic adjustments to keep their power signature as low as possible. The fake hull damage is holding up perfectly. Anyone scanning us will see exactly what we want them to see. Walker nodded slowly. The damage to their ship had taken weeks to prepare. Every blast mark, every torn piece of hull plating had been carefully designed to look real while protecting the vital systems underneath. It was an elaborate trap, and everything had to be perfect. Movement detected, sir, called out Lisa from the sensor station. Her voice was tight with anticipation. 3 Coalition battlecruisers just dropped out of hyperspace. They're at the edge of the sector, about 30 minutes out at their current speed. Walker allowed himself a small smile. Right on schedule. Status of our reactor. Cold but ready, Tom responded. We can go from 0 to full power in 15 seconds. The bridge crew worked in near silence as the minutes ticked by. They'd trained for this mission for months. Every person knew their role, knew exactly what to do when the time came. The plan was simple but dangerous. Appear helpless, draw in the enemy, then strike when they least expected it. The coalition ships grew larger on their screen. They were impressive vessels, each one nearly twice the size of the Steadfast. Their hulls gleamed with polished metal, decorated with the red and gold markings of the coalition fleet. They moved with the confidence of predators who'd spotted easy prey. "They're scanning us," Lisa reported, reading standard salvage protocols. "They think we're dead in the water." Walker watched as the enemy ships spread out in a standard salvage formation. It was exactly what they'd hoped for. The coalition's arrogance working against them. They never expected a human vessel to be a threat, especially not one that appeared so badly damaged. "Incoming transmission," said Mike from communications. "They're broadcasting on all frequencies." "Let's hear it," Walker ordered. A deep, authoritative voice filled the bridge. "Attention, disabled vessel. This is General Reed of the Coalition Fleet. Your ship is now under our control. Do not attempt any hostile actions. We will begin boarding procedures shortly." Walker didn't respond. The silence would make them think the Steadfast's communications were damaged. He watched as small dots began to appear on the tactical display, boarding shuttles launching from the coalition ships. "Multiple boarding craft detected," Lisa confirmed. "They'll be in weapons range in 5 minutes." The tension on the bridge rose with each passing second. Walker could feel his crew's anticipation, their eagerness to spring the trap. But timing was crucial. They had to wait until the coalition ships were fully committed. "Sir," Tom whispered urgently, "one of the false hull plates is shifting. If it moves too much, they might detect our active systems underneath." Walker frowned. This was the risk with their plan. One small detail could give everything away. "Can you stabilize it?" "Working on it," Tom replied, his fingers flying over his console, rerouting minimal power to the magnetic clamps. "There. That should hold it." The boarding shuttles grew closer. On the main screen, Walker could now make out their details. Sleek, predatory craft designed to cut through a ship's hull and deposit troops. The coalition believed in overwhelming force, using superior numbers to crush any resistance. "Enemy vessels holding position," Lisa reported. "They're in perfect formation for salvage operations." She paused, checking another reading. "Sir, they've lowered their shields. They're not expecting any resistance." Walker allowed himself another small smile. Everything was falling into place. The coalition's biggest weakness was their pride, their absolute certainty that humans were inferior. That pride was about to cost them dearly. "All hands," Walker said quietly into the ship's internal comm system. "Final positions. Prepare for Operation Phoenix." Throughout the massive ship, hundreds of crew members tensed in readiness. In the engine room, engineers stood ready at their stations, prepared to bring the reactor to full power. In the weapon bays, gunners sat at their posts, weapons pre-targeted on the coalition vessels. Every system, every weapon, every person was ready. The boarding shuttles were now less than a minute away. Walker could imagine the coalition troops inside, probably joking among themselves about how easy this mission would be. They'd be expecting to find a dead ship, maybe a few survivors to take prisoner. Instead, they were flying straight into the jaws of a trap. 30 seconds to optimal range, Lisa announced. Walker straightened his uniform, a gesture that his crew recognized. They all tensed, ready for his command. 20 seconds. The coalition ships loomed large on their screens now, their weapons dormant, their shields down, their boarding shuttles exposed. They'd positioned themselves perfectly, exactly where the Steadfast's weapons would do the most damage. 10 seconds. Walker took a deep breath. Months of preparation had led to this moment. One way or another, they were about to change the course of the war. 5 seconds. The boarding shuttles were almost touching the Steadfast's hull now. In moments, they would attach their cutting tools and begin burning their way inside. Mark. Walker's voice rang out clear and firm. Execute Operation Phoenix. The bridge erupted into activity. The main lights blazed to life as the reactor surged from dormant to full power in seconds. Throughout the ship, the false hull plates fell away, revealing pristine armor and fully operational weapon systems underneath. The Steadfast transformed from a dead hulk into a fully armed warship in the blink of an eye. On the Coalition ships, alarms would be blaring. But it was already too late. The Steadfast's weapons were powered up and locked on target. The trap was sprung, and the real battle was about to begin. Walker allowed himself one final moment of satisfaction before giving the order that would change everything. All batteries. Fire at will. The Steadfast's weapons blazed to life, streaks of brilliant energy bursting from its hull. The Coalition boarding shuttles never stood a chance. Half of them vanished in balls of fire, while the others scattered like startled birds, desperately trying to return to their motherships. On the bridge of the lead Coalition ship, General Reed stared in disbelief at his tactical display. The supposedly dead human vessel had transformed into a fully armed warship in seconds. His perfectly planned salvage operation was turning into a nightmare. Shields up. Battle stations. Reed roared, but he knew they were already too late. His ships were in the worst possible position, arranged in a salvage formation that left them exposed to enemy fire. They'd walked right into the humans' trap. Back on the Steadfast, Captain Walker was calling out orders in rapid succession. Target their engines first. Don't let them reposition. Tom, give me everything you can from the reactor. Lisa, keep those jamming fields up. I don't want them calling for help. The space around them lit up with weapons fire. The Steadfast's main guns pounded the nearest Coalition ship, its shots finding weak points in the enemy's hastily raised shields. The Coalition vessel shuddered under the impact, pieces of its armor plating torn away by the force of the blasts. Sir, Lisa called out from her station. They're trying to coordinate their defense, but our jamming is keeping them from synchronizing their shield frequencies. Walker nodded grimly. This was another part of their plan. The Coalition ships relied heavily on working together, combining their shields and coordinating their fire. By disrupting their communications, the Steadfast was forcing each ship to fight alone. The bridge rocked as return fire finally started coming in. The Coalition ships were recovering from their surprise, bringing their powerful weapons to bear. But they were still out of position, their shots not nearly as effective as they could have been. Shields holding at 85%, Tom reported. Those hits aren't as strong as they should be. They still haven't got their weapons fully powered up. Walker watched as another salvo from the Steadfast struck home. The Coalition ship to their right was in serious trouble, its engine section sparking and venting atmosphere. But the other two vessels were starting to maneuver, trying to get into better firing positions. Sir, detecting power surge from the lead ship, Lisa warned. They're charging their main weapon array. Roll ship, present our reinforced ventral armor, Walker commanded. The Steadfast turned gracefully in space, just as a massive beam of energy shot from the Coalition flagship. The blast struck their armored underside, the impact making the whole ship vibrate. Damage report. Shields down to 60% on the ventral side, but armor held. Tom called back. That was their best punch, Captain. They won't be able to fire that weapon again for at least 3 minutes. Walker allowed himself a tight smile. Then let's make those 3 minutes count. All batteries. Concentrate fire on the damaged ship. Let's take one of them out of the fight. The Steadfast's gun spoke again, this time focusing all their fire on the wounded Coalition vessel. Its shields, already weakened, couldn't withstand the barrage. Explosions bloomed across its hull as vital systems were hit. On the Coalition flagship's bridge, General Reed was furious. How? He demanded. How did they hide all this? Our scans showed nothing. His tactical officer, looking shaken, tried to explain. Sir, they must have developed some new kind of stealth technology. The damage we saw, it was all fake, carefully designed to hide their real capabilities. Reed slammed his fist on his command chair. The humans had outplayed him completely. His arrogance, his certainty that no human ship could threaten his force, had led them right into this trap. And now one of his ships was about to be destroyed. The damaged Coalition vessel's engines finally gave out. It started drifting, emergency pods launching from its sides, as the crew abandoned ship. The other two Coalition ships tried to move to protect their stricken companion, but the steadfast, superior position made it impossible. Enemy vessel is disabled, Lisa reported with satisfaction. Reading multiple hull breaches and critical system failures. She's out of the fight, sir. Walker nodded. Good. Now for the others. Tom, how's our power holding up? Reactors running hot but stable, sir. We can keep this up. The battle continued to rage. The remaining Coalition ships were fighting harder now, their initial shock replaced by desperate determination. Energy beams and projectiles crisscrossed the space between the vessels, some finding their marks, others disappearing into the void. The Steadfast took another hard hit, this one catching them on the port side. Warning alarms blared as damage reports came in. Port shield generator is struggling, Tom announced. We've got damage control teams responding, but we need to protect that side. Walker studied the tactical display. The Coalition ships were trying to flank them to get to their weakened port side. But that movement was also an opportunity. Lisa, do we still have the port missile tubes? Yes, sir. They're operational. Load them with our special packages. Let's give our friends another surprise. The Coalition ships pressed their attack, thinking they'd finally found a weakness to exploit. They didn't notice the missile tubes opening on the Steadfast's port side until it was too late. The missiles that launched weren't ordinary weapons. As they approached the Coalition ships, they suddenly split apart, each one releasing dozens of smaller projectiles. These weren't designed to explode. They were electronic warfare devices, tiny but powerful jammers that attached themselves to the enemy ship's hulls. The effect was immediate. The Coalition vessel's shields began to flicker and fail as the devices interfered with their power distribution systems. Their coordinated attack fell apart as their systems were disrupted one by one. Direct hits, Lisa called out. Their shield strength is dropping across the board. Their weapons are losing power. Walker straightened in his chair. This was the moment they'd planned for, the reason they'd let themselves take damage to the port side. All batteries, fire at will. Let's end this. The Steadfast's guns opened up with everything they had. Without their shields, the Coalition ships were vulnerable. Armor plating melted under the barrage, weapons were knocked offline, and engines sputtered and died. On his flagship's bridge, General Reed watched in horror as his mighty force was systematically taken apart by a single human vessel. His tactical officer was shouting something about unprecedented weapon types, about tricks and traps they'd never seen before. But Reed wasn't listening. He was thinking about how badly he'd underestimated these humans, and how that mistake was about to cost him everything. The battle was reaching its end. The Coalition ships, their weapons nearly useless and their shields gone, could no longer effectively fight back. The Steadfast's superior position and carefully planned strategy had won the day. Walker looked at the destruction around them with a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. It had been a costly victory. Their ship had taken damage, and people had died on both sides. But they'd proven something important today, that humans couldn't be underestimated, that superior numbers and technology weren't everything. Sir, Mike called from communications. We're receiving a transmission from the Coalition flagship. They're surrendering. Walker nodded slowly. Accept their surrender. Prepare boarding parties. He paused, looking at his crew. Well done, everyone. Operation Phoenix is a success. The bridge crew cheered, but Walker kept his eyes on the view screen, watching the Coalition ships power down their remaining systems. This victory would change the war, he knew. After today, no one would ever look at a damaged human ship and assume it was helpless. After today, everything would be different. The boarding parties from the Steadfast moved carefully through the Coalition flagship's corridors. Their boots clanked against the metal floor as they advanced, weapons ready. Even though the ship had surrendered, no one was taking any chances. Leading the main boarding team was Commander Bill Roberts, the Steadfast's security chief. "Keep your eyes open," Bill told his team through the radio. Just because they surrendered doesn't mean everyone got the message. The Coalition ship's interior was a mess. The battle had knocked out many systems, and emergency lights cast red shadows everywhere. Damaged circuits sparked in the walls, and the air smelled of burned metal. Every few minutes, the ship would groan and shake as its damaged structure settled. They encountered small groups of Coalition crew members along the way, all of them sitting with their hands up, following surrender protocols. Bill's team quickly secured each group, treating them firmly but fairly. They weren't here for revenge. They were professionals doing their job. Back on the Steadfast's bridge, Captain Walker was coordinating the entire operation. The view screen showed multiple camera feeds from the boarding teams, along with status updates from around both ships. "Sir," Lisa called from her station, "we're picking up some unusual readings from the Coalition ship's engine room. Could be a self-destruct sequence." Walker's expression hardened. "Get me Commander Roberts immediately." Bill's voice came through quickly. "Roberts here, sir." "Bill, you need to get to their engine room now. We're reading possible self-destruct preparations." "Copy that." "Team 2 with me." Bill's team double-timed it through the corridors, following the ship's markings toward engineering. They encountered more resistance here. A group of Coalition engineers who hadn't accepted the surrender. A brief firefight broke out, but the human team's superior training showed. They quickly subdued the engineers without any casualties. In the engine room, they found what they were looking for. 3 Coalition officers were working frantically at a control panel, trying to override their own safety systems. Bill's team burst in, weapons raised. "Step away from the controls," Bill ordered. "Hands where we can see them." 2 of the officers complied immediately, but the third kept working, his fingers flying over the controls. Bill didn't hesitate. He fired a stun round that dropped the officer before he could finish whatever he was doing. "Engine room secured," Bill reported. "We've got some would-be heroes down here, but the situation is under control." On the bridge of his captured flagship, General Reed sat under guard, watching as human crews efficiently took control of his vessel. His pride was as damaged as his ship, but he was also curious. He'd never seen anything like the tactics the humans had used today. Captain Walker entered the bridge, his uniform neat despite the recent battle. He walked straight to Reed, studying the Coalition general with interest. "Your reputation for tactical brilliance is well earned," Reed admitted grudgingly. "I didn't think humans were capable of such deception." Walker smiled slightly. "That's exactly what we counted on, General. Your belief in our inferiority was your weakness. We just had to play to your expectations." Reed nodded slowly. "The damage to your ship, it was all fake. A trap." "Months of preparation," Walker confirmed. "Every blast mark, every piece of debris, carefully designed to hide our real capabilities. We studied your salvage protocols, learned exactly how you'd approach a disabled vessel. Then we just had to wait for the right target." The general's expression showed a mix of anger and respect. "And those devices you used, the ones that disabled our shields, we've never seen anything like them. Human ingenuity, General. We can't always match your technology, so we find ways around it." Speaking of which, Walker turned to one of his officers. "How's the data retrieval coming?" "Very well, sir," the officer replied. "Their computers are providing a wealth of information. Battle plans, fleet movements, technical specifications. It's all there." Reed's face fell as he realized the full extent of the disaster. Not only had he lost 3 ships to a single human vessel, but now the humans would have access to Coalition military secrets. This defeat would have consequences far beyond this single battle. Meanwhile, in the Steadfast's medical bay, doctors treated wounded from both sides. The human medics worked just as hard to save Coalition lives as they did their own crew members. Several Coalition soldiers watched in surprise as their injured comrades received the same level of care as the humans. One Coalition officer, being treated for a burned arm, spoke quietly to his human doctor. "We were told humans were savages," he said, "that you didn't value life like we did. But I'm seeing something very different." The doctor smiled as she wrapped his arm. "There's a lot about humans you've been told that isn't true. Maybe it's time your people learned who we really are." Back on the bridge, Walker was receiving updates from throughout both ships. The situation was under control, but there was still a lot of work to be done. The disabled Coalition vessel needed to be salvaged, prisoners had to be processed, and their own damage needed repairs. "Sir," Lisa called out, "long-range sensors are picking up more Coalition ships. Looks like a response to the distress call that got out before we jammed communications." Walker nodded. They'd expected this. Time to arrival. At least 6 hours at their current speed. More than enough time. Start downloading everything we can from their computers. "Tom, how are the repairs coming?" "We can be back at full fighting strength in 4 hours, Captain." The damage wasn't as bad as it looked. Walker turned to General Reed. "Your reinforcements will find empty space, General. We'll be long gone, along with all your ship's data and some very interesting Coalition technology samples." Reed looked at him sharply. "You're not going to destroy my ships." "No need," Walker replied. "By the time your forces arrive, we'll have stripped them of anything useful. The empty hulks we leave behind will be a message, a reminder that underestimating humans is a costly mistake." The next few hours were a flurry of activity. The Steadfast's crews worked efficiently, downloading data, collecting technology samples, and making repairs. They also helped stabilize the Coalition ships, ensuring no lives would be lost after they departed. As the deadline approached, Walker made one final tour of his ship, checking on his crew and the prisoners. He found them talking to each other, sharing stories and experiences. Despite being enemies, they were starting to see each other as people rather than just opponents. "It's time," Walker announced when he returned to the bridge. "Begin withdrawal procedures. Let's get our prize home." The Steadfast's engines powered up, their steady hum filling the ship. As they pulled away from the Coalition vessels, Walker looked at the battlefield one last time. It had been a victory beyond their wildest expectations, not just in terms of military success, but in changing perceptions on both sides. "Send a message to command," he told Mike. "Operation Phoenix successful. Tell them everything is about to change." The Steadfast jumped into hyperspace, leaving behind 3 damaged Coalition ships and countless shattered assumptions about human capabilities. The next phase of the war was about to begin, and nothing would ever be the same. The Steadfast emerged from hyperspace at the edge of human-controlled space. 3 patrol ships immediately moved to intercept them, but backed off when they received the victory codes. Captain Walker watched as the patrol vessels formed an honor escort around his ship. Word of their success had traveled fast. In the ship's main holding area, General Reed sat with his senior officers, all under guard but treated with respect. They were watching a news broadcast that one of the guards had allowed them to see. The Coalition leadership was in chaos, trying to explain how 3 of their best ships had been captured by a single human vessel. "They're already calling it the Phoenix Gambit," one of Reed's officers said quietly. "Our entire military doctrine is being questioned. Everything we thought we knew about human capabilities was wrong." Reed nodded slowly. "We became too confident, too set in our ways. We stopped innovating because we thought we were superior. The humans never stopped thinking, never stopped finding new ways to fight." The guard watching them was surprised by their conversation. He'd expected anger or resentment, not this kind of analytical acceptance of defeat. Maybe the Coalition forces weren't as arrogant as they'd been led to believe. On the bridge, Walker was in a secure communication with Fleet Command. The faces of 5 admirals looked back at him from the screen, their expressions a mix of satisfaction and concern. "The data you recovered is invaluable," Admiral Stone was saying. "Their fleet movements, their technology specs, this could change the entire course of the war. But there's something else, something we need you to know." Walker leaned forward. "What is it, sir?" "Your victory has had an unexpected effect. We're receiving communications from multiple coalition worlds. It seems your treatment of the prisoners, combined with the shocking defeat of their best ships, has caused some serious political upheaval. There are calls for peace talks." Walker absorbed this news with surprise. They'd hoped to prove humans couldn't be easily defeated, but triggering peace talks, that was beyond their wildest expectations. "There's more," another admiral added. "Some of the coalition's client races are reconsidering their allegiance. They've seen that the coalition isn't invincible. Some are already reaching out to us about possible alliances." In the ship's engineering section, Tom was working with a team of technicians to analyze the coalition technology they'd captured. Some of it was more advanced than human tech, but not in the ways they'd expected. "Look at this," he said to his team, pointing at a power coupling. "They focused so much on raw power that they forgot about efficiency. We could help them improve this by at least 30% just by redesigning the flow regulators." One of his engineers looked up in surprise. "Help them? They're the enemy." Tom shook his head. "Maybe not for much longer. And if we're going to have peace someday, we need to understand each other, both our strengths and our weaknesses." Throughout the ship, similar scenes were playing out. Human crew members and coalition prisoners were talking, sharing stories, finding out that they had more in common than they'd thought. The artificial barriers of propaganda and prejudice were starting to break down. In the medical bay, the coalition wounded were recovering well, thanks to the combination of human and coalition medical techniques. The human doctors had learned some valuable lessons from coalition medical technology, while the coalition medics were impressed by human surgical innovations. "Your people adapt so quickly," a coalition medical officer said to the human chief surgeon. "We spend years perfecting a single technique, but you're always trying new approaches, combining different methods." The surgeon smiled. "That's because we had to. We couldn't match your technology, so we had to get creative. Sometimes having less makes you learn more." Walker was in his ready room, reviewing the after-action reports, when Lisa buzzed him. "Sir, you need to see this. We're picking up massive fleet movements from coalition space." He rushed to the bridge, where the tactical display showed dozens of coalition fleet elements on the move. But they weren't advancing. They were pulling back, consolidating their forces. "They're scared," Lisa said wonderingly. "They don't know if there are more ships like us out there, more traps waiting to be sprung. They're actually retreating from contested systems." Walker studied the display thoughtfully. "They're not just retreating. They're creating space for negotiations. They want to talk, but they need to save face. This way they can claim they're repositioning their forces, not running away." In the ship's mess hall, human crew members had invited some of the coalition prisoners to share a meal. It was against regulations, but Walker had approved it. He understood the importance of these small gestures. "Your food is interesting," a coalition officer said, trying what the humans call pizza. "We never mix flavors like this. Everything in our culture is meant to be pure, separate." "Maybe that's the real difference between us," a human crew member replied. "We believe that mixing things up, trying new combinations, makes everything better, even if it gets messy sometimes." The next few days were filled with debriefings, data analysis, and preparations for their arrival at Earth. The coalition prisoners would be transferred to a secure facility, but already there was talk of them serving as cultural advisors for the peace negotiations. Walker spent time with General Reed, learning about coalition culture and sharing insights about humanity. They were building a foundation of understanding that could prove crucial in the days ahead. "Your trap was brilliant," Reed admitted during one of their talks. But it was more than just the tactical victory. You showed us something we didn't expect: humanity. Your people treated mine with respect, even after defeating us. That's not how our propaganda said you would behave. Walker nodded. Maybe that's the biggest trap we sprung, showing you who we really are, not who you thought we were. As they approached Earth, Walker gathered his crew for one final address. They stood in the ship's largest cargo bay, humans and coalition prisoners alike, all listening. What we achieved goes beyond military victory, he told them. We proved that courage, creativity, and compassion are more powerful than any weapon. We showed that enemies can become friends, that understanding is better than fear. Whatever happens next, remember this: change starts with people willing to think differently, to take chances, to see beyond old prejudices. The crew applauded, and to everyone's surprise, so did many of the coalition prisoners. Something had changed in these few days. A glimpse of what might be possible if both sides could move past their fears and assumptions. As Earth grew larger in their view screens, Walker thought about everything that had led to this moment. The months of planning, the risks they'd taken, the lives affected by their actions. They'd set out to prove humans couldn't be underestimated, but they'd accomplished something far more important. They'd opened the door to peace, shown that different species could learn from each other, work together, find common ground. The real victory wasn't in the battle they'd won, but in the future they'd made possible. 6 months had passed since the Steadfast's historic victory. The Great Hall of the Earth Defense Command was filled with representatives from both human and coalition worlds. Captain Walker stood at attention in his dress uniform, watching as human and coalition leaders signed the preliminary peace accords. The journey to this moment had been challenging. After the Steadfast returned to Earth, both sides had to overcome decades of mistrust and propaganda. But the seeds planted during those few days after the battle had grown into something remarkable. General Reed, no longer a prisoner but now serving as the coalition's chief diplomatic advisor, stood nearby. He caught Walker's eye and gave a slight nod. They'd come a long way from that day when Reed had thought he was capturing a helpless vessel. The signing ceremony ended with applause from both sides. As the crowd began to mingle, Walker found himself surrounded by his old crew members, all specially invited for this historic occasion. Hard to believe it all started with us playing dead in space, Tom said, grinning. He'd been promoted to chief engineer of the entire Earth Defense Fleet, his innovations with coalition technology leading to remarkable improvements in human ships. Lisa, now heading the new Joint Species Technical Exchange Program, nodded in agreement. The best trap we set wasn't the fake damage or the hidden weapons. It was making them see us as people, not just enemies. The success of the Phoenix Gambit, as it had come to be known, had changed military doctrine throughout known space. No one took anything at face value anymore. But more importantly, it had taught both sides the value of looking beneath the surface, of questioning their assumptions about each other. Walker watched as human and coalition children played together in one corner of the hall, part of a new cultural exchange program. They didn't see aliens or enemies. They just saw new friends to play with. It was a powerful symbol of what the future could hold. "Captain Walker," a voice called. He turned to find Admiral Stone approaching with several coalition officials. "These gentlemen would like to discuss your new assignment." Walker raised an eyebrow. This was the first he'd heard of any new assignment. The Admiral smiled. "We're forming a joint task force," one of the coalition officials explained. "A combined fleet of human and coalition ships working together to explore deep space. After seeing how your crew handled first contact situations and cultural exchanges, we believe you're the perfect choice to lead it." The implications were enormous. A joint fleet, sharing technology and expertise, learning from each other's strengths. It was more than just a military operation. It was a statement about the future both sides wanted to build. In another part of the hall, the Steadfast's medical team was deep in discussion with coalition medical officers. The exchange of medical knowledge had already saved thousands of lives on both sides. What had started as battlefield medicine had grown into a comprehensive program of shared research and development. Remember how surprised they were when we first treated their wounded? The chief surgeon asked, smiling at the memory. Now we're planning joint hospitals on 3 different worlds. The changes weren't limited to military and medical cooperation. Trade routes were opening up between human and coalition worlds. Cultural exchanges were becoming common. People on both sides were learning each other's languages, customs, and ways of thinking. Bill, the Steadfast's former security chief, was now training the first mixed human coalition security teams. It's amazing, he told Walker. They're learning our adaptability, and we're learning their discipline. Together, we're better than either of us were alone. As the evening wore on, Walker found himself on a balcony overlooking the city. General Reed joined him there, both of them contemplating the lights below. You know what the history books will say? Reed asked. They'll say the war ended because of a clever military trap. But we know it was more than that. Walker nodded. It was about seeing past our fears and prejudices, about realizing that different doesn't mean inferior or superior. It just means different. My people are learning that lesson, Reed said. Slowly, but they're learning. Your victory showed us that there's strength in flexibility, in being willing to change and adapt. We've become too rigid, too sure of ourselves. Inside the hall, a group of scientists was presenting the latest results of joint human coalition research projects. The combination of coalition precision and human creativity was leading to breakthroughs neither side could have achieved alone. Look at that, Tom said, pointing to a display showing a new type of engine. Coalition power systems combined with human control interfaces. 5 years ago, we were trying to blow each other up. Now we're building the future together. The new engine was just one example. Everywhere you looked, the cooperation between humans and coalition was producing remarkable results. Agriculture, medicine, space exploration, environmental protection. Every field was advancing faster than ever before. Walker's old crew had scattered to different assignments now, each playing their part in building this new future. But they still got together regularly to remember that mission, to talk about how a single battle had changed everything. You know what I think the real turning point was? Lisa said during one of these gatherings. It wasn't when we sprung the trap. It wasn't even when we won the battle. It was afterward, when both sides realized we had more to gain by working together than by fighting each other. As the peace ceremony drew to a close, Walker prepared to address the gathered dignitaries. He looked out at the mixed audience, humans and coalition members sitting together, talking, laughing, sharing ideas. It was everything they'd hoped for and more. 6 months ago, he began, we proved that appearances can be deceiving. A seemingly disabled ship turned out to be a powerful weapon. But we learned something far more important. We learned that old enemies can become new allies, that different ways of thinking can complement each other, that the future belongs to those who are willing to look past their prejudices and see new possibilities. He paused, looking at his old crew members, at General Reed, at all the people who had helped make this moment possible. The Phoenix Gambit wasn't just about military deception. It was about revealing truth, the truth that we're all capable of change, of growth, of seeing beyond our assumptions. Today, as we sign these accords, we're not just ending a war. We're beginning a journey together, one that will take us further than either of us could go alone. The applause that followed came from humans and coalition members alike. As Walker looked out at the crowd, he remembered that moment 6 months ago, when his ship had appeared dead in space, waiting to spring its trap. They'd achieved their military objective that day, but they'd also started something much bigger. The war was over. The future was beginning, and it looked brighter than anyone could have imagined.